As the year 2024 draws to a close, I reflect on a year that has exposed some of the darkest aspects of humanity. In Gaza, Palestinian civilians continue to be brutally annihilated on their own land, and we have witnessed alarming levels of femicide and violence against women and girls across the globe. As a true crime podcaster, I often find it deeply uncomfortable and challenging to cover cases of women being assaulted, raped, and murdered. However, I feel a responsibility to share these stories because ignoring them would send the wrong message that violence against women and girls is no longer a pressing issue. In reality, these crimes are still very much a problem, and I hope that by featuring these stories, I can raise awareness, warn listeners, and hopefully impart lessons about the persistent vulnerabilities faced by women, girls, and femmes even in the 21st century. This year has been particularly exhausting and heart-wrenching. From the doctor in India who was brutally attacked on hospital grounds while simply trying to take a nap after a long shift, to the Ugandan Olympian who was set on fire by a former boyfriend, and the 50 women in the UK who died from femicide in the first 3 months of 2024 alone. It's been a truly harrowing year, and it's not even over yet. In this episode, I want to shine a light on a group of women who, in my view, do not receive enough attention: female university or college students. Many of these young women are away from home for the first time in their lives. Often barely out of their teens, they may find themselves in toxic relationships that happen to be their first, or they may be too trusting of those around them. Some have reported intimate partner violence or suspicious behavior from others, only to have those concerns dismissed or overlooked. All these factors contribute to the vulnerability of female university or college students, and there has been a noticeable rise in murder cases involving them. These are the cases of Queen Leanne Daguinsin, Mitsy Balonsai, and Jastine Valdez. Our first case takes us to Cavite, back to the year 2017. On the 5th of January that year, 17-year-old Mitzi Balonsai set out to run a few errands, one of which was to finally enroll for her next semester at her alma mater, the Cavite State University. Mitzi was in her second year of tourism studies, and by all accounts, she was a very responsible and loved young woman who meant the world to her parents. The same day, she texted her parents asking for their permission because she wanted to stay overnight at a friend's place. After Mitzi's parents agreed, they rested easy, knowing that their daughter was safe. The next day, they expected her back home. At first, they were not worried when morning passed and they did not hear back from her. Surely, she would arrive soon, right? When she didn't, Mitzi's parents, Jerry, a machine operator for San Miguel Yamamura in Trias City, Cavite, and Mother Marivic, an OFW in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, grew quite worried. Jerry Balunsay then reported his daughter missing, whilst Marivic was probably extremely anxious being so far away in Saudi and not knowing at that point what was going on. Little did they know, Mitzi was not too far away from her own home, and yet she would never ever make it back there alive. On the 6th of January 2017, residents of Trece Martires City in Cavite were shocked to learn that a mutilated body was found in a rice sack that was stuffed into a box, which was then dumped on a vacant lot, most probably overnight. The police were called in at 8:45 that morning, and after finding Mitzi's bag with its contents in the rice sack, the body parts were eventually identified as belonging to Mitzi. The identification was further confirmed when they found a mole on Mitzi's body that was said to be at a specific place as confirmed by her very distraught parents. By January 7th, the police had made an arrest. From the reports I have found and used for this episode, it was initially unclear how the arrested person landed on the police's radar. But what was clear in those early days was that the police arrested a man by the name of Alvin Ibarra de Los Angeles. Alvin was 20 years old at the time of his arrest, and as we would learn later, he used to date Mitzi. Alvin went to the same university as Mitzi and was a food tech student. Both students were part of a theater group, and it was assumed that they both met and got to know each other through the group's activities. Mitsy and Alvin then became a couple, a relationship that did not last long. They were only together for 4 months. It was after this breakup that things turned sinister. Only Mitsy would not be aware of this until it was too late. Alvin confessed immediately after he was arrested, and by the 9th of January, he was charged with murder under Republic Act 7610, better known as the Child Abuse Law, since Mitsy was still a minor. But what actually happened? From initial reports, a week after Mitsy's death, it would seem that Alvin wanted to reconcile with Mitsy and become a couple again. Mitsy did not want this. The two started arguing. At first, it wasn't clear to me where the two were when this was happening, but at least one report cited that the former couple were in an apartment unit that, according to this report, was rented by a friend of Alvin's, but where Alvin did not actually live in but only had access to. The theory as to why Mitsy was at that particular apartment was that Alvin may have asked Mitsy for a talk, and Mitsy, thinking she was safe with him, went with Alvin after she enrolled and paid her tuition fees that day. In his confession, Alvin then admitted that during this argument with Mitsy, things got heated really quickly. His vision darkened before he started strangling Mitsy with some sort of electrical cord. When she was finally subdued, either because he managed to kill her already or just render her unconscious, he started to brutally cut up her body and then stuffing Mitsy's body parts in a rice sack and then into a cardboard box. It was then theorized that Alvin waited until late that night to dispose of Mitsy's body under cover of darkness. A week after the arrest, we would finally learn from reports how the police managed to trace Mitsy's murder to Alvin. It would seem that witnesses came forward and placed both Alvin and Mitsy at the apartment unit where, as we now know, Mitsy was killed. When the police conducted a crime scene investigation at that apartment, they found traces of blood on the apartment's bathroom wall, floor, in the toilet bowl, the kitchen sink, and the laundry area. The police also recovered 2 knives, both used to kill Mitsy. Now, after arresting Alvin, the police found on him Mitsy's mobile phone as well as the keys and padlock of the apartment rented by his friend, establishing even further his connection to what had now become the primary crime scene in Mitsy's case. During his confession, Alvin asked for forgiveness from Mitsy's parents and from the people who were part of the theater group he and Mitsy were also a part of. Many thought that this was done in rather bad taste, especially after initial results of Mitsy's autopsy came out, revealing a whole new horrible layer to her murder. As it turned out, Mitsy was not only strangled to death and mutilated, she was also raped, either before she died or after, just before she was cut into pieces. Alvin, whilst admitting the killing, denied ever raping Mitsy. Now, the brutality of this crime cannot be overstated, but what bothered me in the days after Alvin was arrested was that the media and the public seemed to have focused more on a rumor or suspicion that Alvin may have been on drugs when he murdered Mitsy and was either a one-time user of illicit drugs or a habitual one. And yes, whether he used drugs occasionally or habitually, it adds an aggravating factor to 2 already unforgivable crimes. But some reports seemed to scapegoat the drugs entirely, ignoring that drug use is never an excuse or a mitigating factor. It felt like a media tactic for clickbait, especially since Mitsy's death happened during the previous administration's intense war on drugs. At that time, any mention of drugs almost guaranteed views, clicks, and heated discussions in the comment sections. Whilst the mention of drugs further vilified Alvin, rightfully so, it also took the attention away from the very heinous way a 17-year-old girl lost a life so full of potential. Another thing that bothered me was the term crime of passion, which was thrown around in several articles following Mitsy's murder. Let me state at this point that I truly hate this term. I will now get on my soapbox about this for a few minutes, so please bear with me. The term crime of passion is usually used when referring to violent crimes committed by someone out of jealousy or anger. The passion part is supposed to indicate that there was no premeditation, therefore potentially reducing the culpability of the perpetrator. If used as a defense, a crime of passion will be argued as a heat of the moment crime, therefore telling the court in a murder case, for example, that one important component of the murder is missing, that being intention or premeditation, also called malice aforethought. Instead of being convicted of a murder, a defendant may then end up with a lesser crime called manslaughter, with a shorter or milder sentence. But that is not the only thing that is problematic about it. The term crime of passion has a victim-blaming tendency that makes it difficult for juries or judges to see the humanity of a victim, as they are being seen as partly to blame for their own demise. Furthermore, in a patriarchal system, the definition of passion is often construed in a way that exonerates men more over their female counterparts. Using the crime of passion defense often ignores gender disparities like this. We also fail to see that in some systems, crimes of passion are often preceded by other red flag actions like assault, manipulation, emotional or physical abuse, some of which were reported but then not taken seriously by the police or the public in general, thus allowing for the crime of passion, usually murder, to then take place. Lastly, using this term also prevents us from seeing bigger patterns in intimate relationships and gender dynamics. We do not see often that there is a higher rate of crimes of passion perpetrated against women, the same group who also disproportionately become victims of any form of intimate partner or domestic violence. We fail to recognize what studies have shown over the years when it comes to intimate partner violence. That is, one of the most dangerous moments in a relationship is when a woman is leaving or has left the relationship. Case studies have shown again and again that this is when perpetrators become the most threatening and dangerous, even without a history of abuse or dysfunction in the relationship. And this is what happened to Mitzi. After her 4-month relationship with Alvin, it was all over, and Alvin was probably not ready to accept that. When I hear stories like this, I can almost picture the man feeling a great sense of entitlement over the woman and her body, therefore making him very angry when he then loses the woman, feeling like he lost something he felt he was entitled to, and committing murder as the only way to regain control and that entitlement. I refuse to call it crime of passion. It is murder as a result of intimate partner violence. There was no passion there whatsoever, just pure murderous calculation. Following his arrest, and understandably so, Alvin was also made to submit to a drug test due to the suspicion that he was under the influence of illicit drugs when he killed Mitzi. It is my understanding that after the arrest and arraignment, Alvin stayed in remand whilst waiting for his trial. But what of the Balunsai family? A couple of days after the arrest, a heartbreaking scene unfolded. When Mitzi's anguished mother arrived from Saudi at her own daughter's wake, seemingly inconsolable and utterly heartbroken, so much so that she wished she had died instead of her daughter. And who can blame her for such a sentiment? Now, the online sources on this story started to get scarce after the 16th of January, and there is virtually nothing online about any trial or conviction. The last thing I could find was a YouTube video by ABS-CBN News summarizing the facts of the case and showing a short interview with Alvin, who changed his confession a little bit by boldly proclaiming that yes, he strangled Mitzi, but he was not the one who dismembered her. This must have been hurtful to hear for all of Mitzi's loved ones. It is one thing to try to get some 15 seconds of fame through an interview, but to essentially take back parts of his confession to throw in some reasonable doubt and implicate maybe a fictional or unknown second perpetrator is something that the Balunsais did not deserve at all. Mitsy Joy Balunsai was laid to rest on the 14th of January 2017, leaving a huge void in the lives and hearts of her loved ones, a void that can never be filled by anything or anyone. Mitzi was said to have been a sweet, loving, responsible, and intelligent young girl. She was on a part scholarship at college, she loved to dance, and was active as a youth leader at church. Her death not only changed the lives of her immediate family, but also the university community she belonged to. Our next case does not take us far from Trece Martires, as this one unfolded also in Cavite, but this time in Dasmariñas. The year is 2023, and we find ourselves at the La Salle University Dasmariñas campus, where a graduating student was causing some of her classmates some concern after not turning up for her classes on March 28th. No one had heard from her, and she had not given anybody reason to believe that she was sick or maybe doing something else. Missing classes so close to graduation was simply out of character for a 24-year-old computer science student, Queen Leanne Daguinsin, a native of Pila, Laguna. Queen's family in Laguna was also worried, as she was not picking up any of their calls, leading them to raise the alarm at DLSU Dasmariñas. Queen's classmates then made the decision to go to her dormitory, according to the premises caretaker, who saw them heading to Queen's place. They peered through Queen's window and saw what would later send shockwaves through the DLSU Dasmariñas student community. Queen's classmates immediately noticed how their classmate was on the floor with a bloodied leg and a pillow on her face. Queen was already dead. What was strange, though, was that her dorm room was double-locked from the inside, so at first glance, it did not seem to her classmates that there was any forced entry. Queen's landlady, upon being told about what happened, ordered the caretaker to force open her room, and this was when the landlady and Queen's classmates realized that she was brutally stabbed to death. The police were then called in, and what immediately became clear was that whoever killed Queen entered her room through her window. This was why her door was still locked, and there was no sign of forced entry anywhere. Upon closer investigation, the police found CCTV footage of an unidentified person of interest who was spotted getting on the rooftop of the Aterado dormitory around 1 a.m. on Tuesday, March 28th, then moving to the second floor of the adjacent Rolisa dormitory where Queen was sleeping. The intruder then entered her room through the window as suspected. The unknown intruder was then next seen leaving the dormitory as if nothing had happened. In the footage, he was also seen carrying some things with him, presumably objects belonging to Queen. The police would later announce that the suspect was seen to be wearing a blue t-shirt, black shorts, a black cap, and white slippers. They also announced that a manhunt was underway. Top politicians offered reward money to anyone who could give the police information about the suspect as well. Now, Queen's initial autopsy results showed that the young student was stabbed a total of 14 times. She sustained 9 stab wounds around her torso, 4 in her left wrist and arm, indicating that Queen bravely and fiercely fought for her life until the very end. Sadly, one fatal cut to her neck caused severe hemorrhaging, which then led to her horrible death. Furthermore, the autopsy results indicated that Queen was not sexually assaulted, leading the police to believe that given all the evidence so far, the motive for Queen's death was robbery and that her death was probably not planned or premeditated. But this news did not exactly appease the student community at La Salle or the community at large in Dasmariñas. On March 29th, therefore, DLSU Dasmariñas President Brother Francisco de la Rosa announced that the university was coordinating with local government to tighten security measures on campus and at the dorms by increasing police visibility and ordering safety marshals to be deployed in the vicinity of private dorms as well as other locations known to be frequented by DLSU students. The university also offered counseling and debriefing sessions to those affected by the news. It also told its students to remain vigilant and alert. They also held a vigil for justice in honor of Queen, making sure to offer up prayers but also appealing for her justice in her case. Meanwhile, Queen's family was absolutely devastated, having lost such a diligent and supportive daughter and sister so soon. Queen was also described as being helpful, generous, and kind. At school, she stood out for being focused, studious, and determined. She had plans on becoming a flight attendant one day and made sure to keep herself physically fit to achieve this goal. Her family, despite being heartbroken, made sure to let the police in Cavite know that they want justice for Queen. They wanted the police to focus on finding out who was responsible for taking away their daughter. By the 31st of March, the politicians who offered the public reward money for any information on the suspects increased the reward to help the police get some movement in the case. All in all, 1.1 million pesos were being offered. To accelerate the murder investigation, the Cavite Police Provincial Office established a special investigation task group called SITG Daguinsin, led by Cavite Police Provincial Director Colonel Christopher Olazo. The task group included members from the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group or CIDG, the Chief of Police of Dasmariñas, and the Provincial Police's legal officer. Colonel Olazo stated that they are continuously tracing the suspects' possible routes to uncover their residence or hiding place. Meanwhile, Representative Barzaga announced that Dasmariñas Mayor Barzaga had issued a memorandum calling for a meeting with dormitory operators on April 3, 2023. The mayor planned to form a team to monitor dormitory operations for resident safety, involving the chief of police, health officers, business permit authorities, firefighters, and barangay officials. According to reports, last year there were about 200 licensed dormitories in Dasmariñas. Representative Barzaga urged barangay officials to report any unlicensed dormitories. The dormitory where the murder occurred, however, was licensed but will be investigated for any potential negligence by its owner. And this is sometimes, if not all the time, the problem when it comes to the safety of students, especially female students. The world is reactionary. I'm pretty sure that dorms at the LSU Dasmariñas have seen their fair share of crimes, and maybe a few students have made their voices heard but were either shut down by their landlords or the university or told to move somewhere else. We do not take women's issues seriously, and women and girls need to die first before these issues are ever taken seriously. Only when there is enough of an uproar or media coverage or social media outrage or the involvement of high-ranking officials does anything get actually done. It is as if women's issues need to be proven worth our time first before we even consider them our issues as well. They are all of our issues, whether you're a woman, a man, boy, or girl. Just because you're a male student or have a son at university instead of a daughter does not mean you get to look away when violence is perpetrated on women's bodies. This thinking, this isolationism or individualism of a different kind is the very reason we do not see a case like Queen's as a community issue when it truly is. Instead of understanding that under the patriarchy, marginalized identities like being a woman can mean that there is a constant threat to our safety and proactive measures need to be taken before anyone's life is taken, we pretend instead that things are fine because they look fine. If security had been better at Queen's dorm and its surroundings, her killer would not have had a chance to even be on that rooftop, but alas, here we are. On March 31st, on the same day, politicians were offering more money in exchange for information on Queen's case. The police announced that they had finally identified a suspect in her murder. Task Group Daguinsin identified the suspect as Angelito Erlano, also known as Kulit, a resident of Barangay San Nicolas II in Dasmariñas City. A follow-up operation conducted by the Dasmariñas City Police Station and Cavite Provincial Intelligence Unit on March 29th, a day after the body was discovered, led to the suspect's identification and residence through CCTV footage analysis. During the operation and just before he was arrested, Angelito Erlano tried to attack a responding officer with a screwdriver but did not succeed. Upon his arrest, the police recovered items from Erlano believed to have been used during the crime, including a black pair of shorts with a white stripe, a blue t-shirt, and a black backpack. Upon further investigation, police records also indicated that Erlano had prior involvement in other robbery cases around Dasmariñas. In later interviews with the press, the police said that apart from CCTV evidence, they had also received help from confidential informants who knew the suspect's location. By the 2nd of April, the public was told a bit more about what the motive was for Queen's murder. It was infuriating to learn that the suspect had no plans to kill Queen, but then only did so because he accidentally stepped on her whilst committing robbery. It was apparently dark in Queen's room and the suspect did not see her whilst she lay there sleeping. When Queen suddenly woke up, she tried to fight off the suspect, and it was during that altercation that Erlano ended Queen's life. This all happened around 1 a.m., 15 hours before Queen was eventually found dead by her classmates. Angelito Erlano was then charged with homicide and also assault following his attempt to resist arrest and attack a police officer. In the wake of Queen's death and Erlano's arrest, the conversation was quickly hijacked by politicians like Bong Revilla Jr., who suddenly advocated for the restoration of the death penalty. I find it rather distasteful and disgusting, and really out of order that politicians like him, who centered themselves right from the beginning by offering rewards and money, and now by reviving conversations about capital punishment, were using the death of a young woman to earn some political brownies for perhaps the next election cycle. I never once believed that politicians who do things like this really care about the victims. If they did, they would discuss the bigger picture problems and not excite the masses with prospects of the death penalty coming back. Instead of appealing to the public's emotions this way, why not open up a conversation about student safety, female student safety, femicide, and other issues that will actually result in preventative measures and ways to keep the community safe instead of talking about state-sanctioned murder that has been proven again and again to be unfair and inhumane. At the end of the day, whether you are for or against the death penalty, you must admit that we have barely seen any rich kids, nepo babies, anak mayaman, well-connected individuals who were executed. Why is that? Because they have money to hire the best lawyers, use legal loopholes, and talk and pay their way out of the electric chair or lethal injection, a privilege that the poor masses do not have, especially if they have been wrongfully convicted. For Revilla, it was never about Queen and her safety or safety of students. Revilla never cared about Queen. Revilla cared and cares about Revilla. Now, beyond the news articles about Erlano's arrest, we do not know much about Queen's case, which leads me to believe that this case is currently still moving really slowly through the judicial system, like many cases that we do not hear about anymore. So, from Dasma Cavite, we instead now turn our attention outside the motherland and on to Ireland. I do not think I ever thought I would be mentioning Ireland in this podcast, but here we are. Our next story takes us to the Emerald Isle by way of Aritao in Luzon. where a young and beautiful woman was born in 1994. At the time of our story, Jastine Valdez, the only child of Teresita and Danilo Valdez, had been living in County Wicklow in Enniskerry, Ireland, for around 4 years. Enniskerry is a village almost 31 kilometers south of Dublin. Justine was raised by her grandparents in the absence of her mom and dad, who left for Ireland to look for work. When the family was reunited in Ireland in 2013, all seemed well, especially for Jastine, who was ambitious and full of life. In Ireland, she thrived, enrolling at the Tallaght Institute of Technology, studying accounting and finance, whilst also working in a bakery. The Valdez family lived on the grounds of Charleville House, where Danilo Valdez worked as a groundsman and Teresita as a housekeeper. On the 19th of May 2018, Jastine traveled to Bray, County Wicklow, to renew her residency permit. After attending the appointment, she visited a gym and purchased bread from a local shop. She then took a bus home. She got off the nearest stop to her house, which was still a 10 to 15 minute walk along Kilcroney Road. It was 6 p.m. at this point. And then something happened. By 11:40 p.m., Jastine's very worried parents were still waiting for their daughter to get home, prompting them to finally call the police when it became clear that their responsible daughter had not communicated with them for hours, very unlike Jastine at all. Pretty quickly, the police mobilized their officers to start a search operation, suspecting that Jastine had become the victim of an abduction, especially after learning that witnesses reported seeing a woman of Asian descent forced into the back of a dark-colored SUV near the entrance to a property called Powers Court Estate. The vehicle, later identified as a Nissan Qashqai with partial registration 171-D, was observed driving erratically in the Puck's Castle Lane area about 30 minutes after Jastine was said to have alighted the bus she was on. Upon linking Jastine's disappearance to the reported abduction, the Garda, or the Irish police, intensified their search efforts, looking for more witnesses and collecting CCTV footage from areas where Jastine could have potentially been taken through or to. It was eventually CCTV footage from Dublin bus that helped identify the vehicle used in the abduction. This car was registered to a woman whose husband had taken it out that evening. When it became clear that the woman was not at that moment in possession of the car, her husband, Mark Hennessy, had quickly become the police's primary suspect. Focusing now on Hennessy, the police issued an urgent appeal for more information. Hennessy's family home was put under covert surveillance with armed support units on standby in case he came back home. Hennessy did not come home that night, but the next morning he called his wife confessing he had done something awful and would not be returning home anymore. Later that day, a vigilant driver who had seen the police's appeal noticed that she was actually behind the suspect's SUV in a place called Shankill and followed him to Cherrywood Business Park, where moments later the police finally arrived to confront him. At approximately 8 p.m. that day, Irish police officers located Mark Hennessy's vehicle in a secluded section of the business park. As they approached him, Hennessy's car window was down and he was said to have been moving slowly, perhaps in an attempt to escape. The following is an excerpt as to what happened afterwards. This is from a police officer's testimony during an inquest years later.
I shouted, "Stop the car!" He didn't respond. My sole intention was to get him out of the car with no access to be able to drive it away from us. My first attempt was to open the door, which was locked. Immediately on trying the door and looking in, I saw him hold up the Stanley knife. He was looking straight at me and the knife went into the forearm. My instinct was to put the boot to the vehicle. He was self-harming right in front of me and it was purely instinctual to kick the window. I became aware of my fellow officer to my right. He was trying the door. It was locked. Then I became aware of the firearm in my peripheral vision. I heard a crack from the firearm and could see a hole in the window and Mr. Hennessy slumping over in the vehicle.
It would seem that in the process of trying to stop Hennessy from escaping and harming himself, a police officer shot him through his car's window. This seemed odd, and there was definitely more to the story, as the inquest into this shooting would later show. The police officer said that he shot Mark Hennessy because Hennessy was initially understood to have turned his body towards the passenger seat as if trying to reach something or reach at something or someone on the car's floor. The police officer is said to have thought that with the knife he had in his hand, Hennessy looked like he was going to hurt Jastine, who was believed to be on the car's floor. The police officer who shot Hennessy was also the police officer who got the tip that there was potentially a second person in the car with Hennessy. But this was not the case. Jastine was not in the car, but Mark Hennessy did slice his own arm when he turned his body away from his car's window. When the shooting was over, a blood-stained note with the words "sorry" and Puck's Castle was found in the car, prompting the police to drive there and to search the area immediately. Nothing was found initially, and so the search was extended. Finally, on the 21st of May, during the search of the Puck Castle area, the police found Jastine's belongings, including a sock and her purse. By mid-afternoon, her body was discovered concealed in thick bushes. A preliminary autopsy determined that her cause of death was manual asphyxiation, indicating she was likely killed shortly after her abduction. Further autopsy results showed that Jastine sustained bruising and abrasions to the genital area, indicating a possible sexual assault either before she was murdered or shortly after. A toxicology report also found evidence of a small amount of cocaine ingested within a couple of hours of death, indicating that Hennessy may have forced Jastine to ingest cocaine, since Jastine is not known to use the substance at all. These details were devastating. Jastine's murder shocked Ireland, a country where stranger abductions are rather rare. Hundreds attended a candlelit vigil in Enniskerry, and a book of condolence was opened for her family. A GoFundMe campaign organized by Outreach Ireland raised over €150,000 in support of Jastine's parents, who later publicly expressed their gratitude to the Irish community and the police for their support. Joseph Squire, who had been in a relationship with Jastine since November 2017, described her as a joyful and lively person. He said that she was always cheerful and active and never engaged in any trouble. Members of the Filipino community in Bray were allowed to pay their respects to Jastine as her remains were laid in repose in a local funeral parlor. By May 31st, 2018, her remains were flown back to Nueva Vizcaya. There, as tradition dictates, Jastine's friends and family were also allowed to attend her lamay until July. On July 2nd, 2018, she was buried in her hometown Aritao, where she was born and raised. Following her burial, Ireland remained shaken by what happened to Jastine, especially because her murder was preceded by another murder of another woman named Anna Kriegel. The Irish government, on top of having to answer questions about women's safety and femicides in Ireland, also needed now to investigate the shooting of Mark Hennessy, as this was perpetrated by a police officer. Now, I am only mentioning this investigation that became an inquest because it revealed certain interesting aspects of Jastine's case as well. It was revealed in the investigation that Hennessy was a deeply disturbed and desperate man who was in a lot of debt due to a very bad gambling addiction. It would seem that Hennessy was feeling hopeless about his situation and went on a bender after purchasing cocaine worth €200. Not only did he take drugs, but he also drank for hours at a pub near where he ended up abducting Jastine. Hennessy's behavior was said to have been erratic, and abducting and murdering Jastine was essentially a crime of opportunity, indicating that Jastine was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, which makes the story sadder than it already is. The investigation results stated that there was no known connection between Hennessy and Jastine. Other unconfirmed reports, mainly from tabloids, beg to differ, stating that Hennessy knew Jastine from a distance and was even obsessed with her, and that he even did a dry run of the abduction before he proceeded with the real thing. In the end, the investigation did not result in a prosecution of the police officer who shot Mark Hennessy, but it certainly gave us a better insight as to what the police learned before, during, and after their search operation and murder investigation into Jastine's case. Jastine had so much to live for. Her family deserved to have her in their life a little bit longer, and the grief her family must feel is indescribable even to this day. Jastine, Queen, and Mitzi Joy's deaths did not only destroy any potential future they could have had, but their passing also forever destroyed other lives within their families and friend circles. The much-needed conversation surrounding violence against women and girls must include issues about safety in the community, in any community, including college campuses, and of course, safety within relationships. I will say this, the patriarchy does not think ahead and in a preventative way when it comes to ensuring the safety of women, girls, and femmes. That is not how that system is set up or designed to operate. So it is up to us to keep talking about these issues, raising awareness about them, and forcing our communities to build a safer world from the grassroots level up, rather than waiting for our politicians to actually pass legislation that would force establishments, communities, schools, and the whole country to rethink what it means to be a female-presenting person in this world, what risks one faces, and how often lives are taken away so brutally, mercilessly, hatefully, for no reason at all. To the women, girls, and femmes who make up the majority of my listeners, this podcast will continue to remain a safe space for you. I hate to tell you to be careful, to be vigilant, to look over your shoulders or be paranoid about your safety when you leave the house at night or party with friends. I prefer to see you being carefree, not constantly planning your route home with pepper spray in hand and 911 at speed dial. I prefer that you are unburdened by constantly having to rethink how your outfit might invite unwanted attention because you should be able to wear what you want to wear. Dressing provocatively is never consent. I would prefer to tell you that it is okay to break up at any time and not to worry that statistically the unsafest part of a breakup is when you have already left, because that is when we see a lot of revenge killings by previous romantic partners. I would like to tell you all these things, to just be a girl, a woman, a femme, to live unencumbered, but this is not our reality yet. To the few men who listen to this, if you consider yourself one of the good ones, tell your other male friends to see us as humans, then to learn empathy, then to unlearn misogyny, then to stand up for us when your compare, kabarkada, says something sexistic or misogynistic, or when they aggressively flirt with us when we are already looking very uncomfortable. Be that guy who is not afraid to call out your kabarkada for being a chauvinist pig. Be that guy who will not touch a hair on a woman's head unless you are given sober, informed, and enthusiastic consent. Be that guy who will not feel entitled to your ex-girlfriend's body and life when she breaks up with you. Be the man who remembers that our bodies are not yours for the taking. Our choices are ours to make. You are not entitled to a hug, a kiss, a handshake, a pity fuck, a pity date, not even a conversation just because you bought us dinner or courted us for the last 3 months. You are not entitled to anything the way we are not entitled to your bodies. Men, especially after what happened in the USA after their elections, which is, I think, a window into what is about to happen to women's rights and human rights in general. This fight to end violence against women cannot be done without you. So I implore you, men, fight for us by fighting beside us.